Let me introduce myself to begin with. My name's Peter Billington. I'm the Secretary of the Lancashire TUC, and this meeting has been called by the North East Lancashire TUC, and we're all part of the National TUC Congress. Everybody's aware of what the subject of the meeting is. It's to look at the issue of fracking, shale gas extraction, and I'd like to start by introducing our two speakers and also just making a comment on the fact that we only have two speakers. The two speakers we do have are going to put the case for opposition to shale gas extraction. Caudrilla, whose name will be known to almost everybody, I would assume here, who are a commercial company which carries out shale gas extraction, were invited to send speakers, and in fact, from what I've been told, confirmed that they would send speakers on the proviso that the meeting would be even-handed from the chair's point of view, and that both sides were allowed an equal opportunity to present their case. Now, despite being given the opportunity, they haven't turned up, so it's open to you to draw your conclusions about why that's the case. But no doubt everybody will get the chance to question our two speakers, and if you feel that you need further explanations of any points of opposition to shale gas extraction, I'm sure both of our speakers will be able to take those on and answer them adequately. So let me introduce, first of all, on my right, Dr. Brian Barking. Brian is a Fellow of the Institute of Energy at the University of Leeds, and also was involved in a number of environmental campaigns over the years, many of them involving parts of East Lancashire, in particular the Bacup open cast mining explorations, which Brian provided advice to those opposing the applications, and which was eventually successful in stopping those applications going ahead. Brian was also involved in the Hinkley Point campaign, and also provided research to the National Union of Mine Workers in its heyday, I'm assuming, Brian. Brian is going to deal with the economic aspects of shale gas extraction and look at the arguments which are presented in favour of it. On my further right, as chairpersons always say, it doesn't carry, particularly in this case, it doesn't carry any political intent, is Martin Empson. And again, I'm sure Martin's name will be known to many people who have been involved in environmental campaigns. Martin's a leading figure in the campaign against climate change. He's a member of Unison and author of Land and Labour, which is on the desk beside the door as you come in. And Martin may refer to the content of the book in his comments. He was also involved quite clearly as an activist in a number of campaigns in the same way Brian has been. In particular, I know that Martin has been at Barton Moss in the campaign against shale gas extraction there. Finally, to deal with the format of the meeting. Originally, we were going to give each speaker of the four that have been invited 10 minutes each, and then we open up for questions and discussion. But Martin and Brian have got 10 minutes plus each, I would imagine, given that there are two less speakers than we had planned. But we'll stick to the original format in terms of question and answer and discussion. The meeting's planned to finish at 9 PM because our speakers have got buses and trains to catch, etc. So that gives you an overview of what's going to happen.
Who was the fourth speaker that didn't turn up?
I'm assuming that the two speakers who haven't turned up were both from Caudrilla. Is that right?
That's right.
Yeah.
Oh.
When did they give back word that they weren't coming?
They didn't, they just haven't shown up.
What?
We were assured they were going to come, but...
We're supposed to trust these guys.
No, they did that with sending the fracking machine.
Yeah. Right, as I said, it's on to you to draw your conclusions about why these speakers haven't shown themselves. What I'd very quickly like to do, because you don't want to listen to me, but I wanted to quickly set out the position of the TUC nationally on shale gas extraction, because the meeting has been called by an organisation which is part of the TUC, so it's only fair that you know what our national position is. the 2013 TUC Congress made a statement which basically says that the principle of precaution should be used when developing new sources of energy. And that's something that I think everybody would accept. Precaution from 2 points of view. Firstly, that the health of people, and secondly, the health of the environment should be put before profit. So precaution from those 2 important points of view. It also, the statement, makes reference to the fact that shale gas extraction is, like a lot of natural resources, a finite resource, and the actual finity, if that's a correct verb, we'll look at in our contributions from the 2 speakers. And because of that, it's clearly not something which is sustainable over hundreds of years. It has a limited life. And finally, the TUC expressed concern about some of the reports which have been widely publicised on, for example, the cause of minor earthquakes in Blackpool, and water pollution, which is perhaps the larger of the problems which many people are concerned about. So that's the TUC's position, and it's within that sort of context that we decided to go ahead and call a meeting to look at shale gas extraction. So, without any further comments from me, could I first of all invite Dr. Brian Parkin, who will look at the economic aspects of shale gas extraction. Brian. Thank you. Can you hear me back there?
No, that's good.
Yes. The microphone? Excuse me. Is that clear?
Yeah.
Right, okay. Good evening. In the absence of speakers from Caudrilla, I'll play devil's advocate in a sense, because I can give you some information regarding what they say as far as the benefits of shale gas exploration and exploitation are concerned. And also put it in the context of the government's declared imperative that shale gas exploration become a central plank of energy policy and in fact economic recovery. Obviously I will be arguing against that, so in a sense I'm playing devil's advocate. But and some of the points I will be making, which are assertions of Caudrilla and the petroleum industry generally, I'm sure you'll be able to see daylight through the holes yourself. But having said that, I'll just get straight into the arguments for shale gas exploration and exploitation. And those are basically they're put into three categories. Why we need it. One is that we're approaching an energy crisis. The UK itself is approaching an energy crisis for a whole number of reasons. I won't go into the reasons why you're going to get power cuts within the next year or so. That's down to the fact that generators have ripped everybody off and not investing any money in power generation plant, but that's another matter. But then there is a question of security of supply. Now, I would suggest that if we're going to be in any way responsible, we have to look at things in not only in the abstract sense of energy security, but what do we mean by energy security? Because I wrote in Socialist Review an article just over a year ago, situation on the rigging of the gas markets in the UK. And in that I was able to identify that in this country energy security was a matter of great concern for 5.5 million households who live in fuel poverty. They live in fuel poverty because a company called Centrica, who owns British Gas, which has the monopoly power of purchasing on the wholesale market, which now has invested £160 million in Caudrilla, is rigging the market. And it rigs the market systematically and at the close of trading, but also rigs it on the 28th of September every year. 28th September every year is very important because that then sets the winter peak demand price, which means that you pay more or you shiver during the winter period when people need warmth and where children and the elderly are at risk of cold-related illness and hardship. Yeah, that's one of the companies behind Caudrilla.
the question of energy security, if they were at all serious about it, they would have invested a fraction of what they've invested in nuclear research, and would have put it into renewable energy. If they're interested in the overall sense of energy security, they wouldn't have maliciously closed down the coal industry. If they were interested in the conservation of energy, they wouldn't have wasted what could have been a century worth of North Sea assets of gas. Instead, they've frittered away in gas-fired power stations. And now, by the end of next year, the UK will be dependent on 75% of its gas supply on imports. Now, the argument is here that shale gas will actually allow us to sidestep the dependency on imports, which is, I mean, the Tories really should choose their friends more carefully, because they can't really control what they say. Because there's a company called INEOS, which runs the Grangemouth plant. INEOS is a very notorious fly-by-night petrochemical company. Petrochemical companies are fly-by-night. They're basically a combination of gangsters and mafia. Gangsters and cowboys. But they, and I would have said that if Caudrilla were here as well. The INEOS have actually looked. They actually have a petrochemical plant at Grangemouth, and they use ethylene as the basic raw material for their feedstock. And they've said that from next year onwards, they're going to be investing in importing liquid petroleum gas from North America, where there's a shale gas boom. This shale gas boom in North America is washing the European markets with cheap gas, or is about to. It's going to have a whole number of distorting influences in the world markets, because the displacement of cheap American gas is also going to put a lot of very cheap, dirty coal on the world markets as well. And the other thing about the energy markets is they determine environmental policy. Governments will put hand on heart and say, we will try to emit less carbon dioxide, we will try to prevent acid rain deposition, we will try to ensure we are committed to energy efficiency. And suddenly there's an availability of a cheap supply of gas for a short period of time, and all that prudence goes to the wall. In America, they're saying that shale gas is so cheap, we can afford to burn it in open cycle turbines. Don't even bother with higher efficiency combined cycle turbines. They will burn gas at the same level of inefficiency as coal-fired power stations. They're throwing away the carbon advantage that gas has over coal. The imperative of the market will override both environmental and social responsibility. Make no mistake about it, that is what is really going to drive this insanity. Caudrilla says that in the area just to the north and west of you, the Bowland Forest, it's the Bowland Forest area, their commercial boast is now that there is £160 billion worth of gas, saleable value of gas. That's equivalent to, that is more than the national deficit of the UK. And that's the Bun Company's claim in a small area of Lancashire. Now, there is lots of data produced by the British Geological Survey. Hitherto, the British Geological Survey was one of these kind of like a royal institution or something like that. Something very august, something very scholarly, something very conservative, something very low, downbeat, very unsexy in the way it did things. Since the Conservatives got in and desperately looking for instruments by which they can recover or help the economy to recover from their own neoliberal inflicted madness. The British Geological Survey has become a bit more upbeat. So I think it's sold its soul to market forces really, because they've tended to be behind press releases which have vastly exaggerated the claims for shale gas, and they've made, whilst the claims made by companies like Caudrilla and the other speculators have been for gas in place. In actual fact, what they haven't actually mentioned is what is recoverable from that gas in place. I don't think many people dispute the overall figure of gas in place. It's what is recoverable. Now, shale gas fracking is not a new technology. It was developed in the 1940s in the eastern side of the United States when the oil wells in states like Philadelphia and Oklahoma were starting to run dry. And at that time, the extraction of oil in place was about 25%. And because of the end of the war and the anticipated shortfall, this was before the big Persian Gulf fields came on stream, there was concern that there would be a petroleum shortage in the United States, and companies started to use fracturing of reserves to extract residual amounts. Fracking has never been used as a primary source of extraction. It's always been used to get small amounts of residual fuel materials out of the ground. And what the government is asking us to buy is an economic miracle on the back of residual technology to get the remnants of an energy reserve out of completely speculative boomtown declarations of wishful thinking. That is essentially what we've been asked to buy. And so within that framework, there is no sense of social responsibility. We could, if we were that energy rich, we should, and I think any society worth its salt would actually determine its decency on the fact that old people and young do not go cold. That energy is seen as a human right. This is a reserve which is natural. This is there for us to husband responsibly, to conserve, to preserve, to make sure that future generations can benefit from those resources. Not a boomtown speculative Dodge City kind of mentality which is fueling this situation. Some years ago, I was involved with the TUC trying to sabotage the electricity supply industry privatisation. And I went undercover. I wasn't very undercover, but I went to these seminars at Cafe Royal and the Ritz and Claridge's, and they were hosted by energy consultants and energy analysts, and they'd come around, they'd come from all over the world, and they'd say to these suited barrow boys from the City of London, this is your chance to make a fortune. They'd be absolutely clear about it. You can make a fortune. And when I remember one seminar, one of them said, now look, in order to make a fortune, you've got to know what you're making a fortune out of. Does anyone here know what electricity is? And not one hand went up. I said, come on, you're going to make a fortune. What's electricity? Where's it come from? And this idiot said, well, it comes from a switch on the wall, doesn't it? And this is the sum total of the intellectual standard of people who are behind outfits like Caudrilla, who get rich quick, kind of irresponsible. I can't say there are any responsible elements of the financial sector, really, but it draws out the worst elements, the most speculative, irresponsible elements from them. So, in response to that, I'll be very brief, but the thing about just in terms of, I tried to deal with it in very outline, very crude terms, the kind of market-driven madness behind all this. And by all means, feel free to interrogate me afterwards. If you think I'm being biased, I am being biased, but you can torture me for it if you wish. But one thing that that strikes me is that apart from the economic downside, is also the complete lack of any scientific consistency on which they base their estimates. If you look at what's happening in southern states of America, where fracking is taking place on a massive scale, you have in states like Louisiana, the Texas Panhandle, Carolina, up to southern Ohio, you have enormous areas of land which are now being opened up for fracking. This land is more or less geologically continuous. It's not very faulted. It is fairly shallow. The reserves are fairly shallow. It is very underpopulated. Compare that with this area. Lancashire would fit within a tiny corner of the Texas Panhandle, You have millions of people in the northwest of the country. It's intersected by roads, but we also have some very precious areas of wildlife habitat, which the Forest of Bowland being in the middle of it as well. And there's without any regard to the sensitivity and delicacy of the balance of those systems, they want to go in. Mob-handed. And I'll tell you one thing as well that will drive them, which will encourage them, because it's now been declared a national imperative as part of the economic recovery. George Osborne has actually set tax breaks for these companies, 60% tax breaks. Some of them have said they want corporation tax to operate for the exploitation of the production period of 16% corporation tax. These people are brave new world, they're risk takers, they want feather bedding, they don't want to pay any taxes, they want subsidies to explore, and they want low tax thresholds for the duration in which they can rip off the reserves. It's the brave new world of finance cowards, basically. And I think if you look at the proclamations of Caudrilla, how there's so much gas in place. If you look at the cross-section of the, you can't see it from here, but the reserves, there's about 30 faults, major faults, seismic faults, which go very deep. Apart from that, there are also alluvial faults, which means there's no continuous access to reserves. So what you'll have are these platforms, they're called pads, production pads, about 5 wellheads on the production pad. They will drill down to the resource with lined wells. They will then go sideways into what are called slant drilling and horizontal drilling. They'll drill out about 1 kilometre from the wellhead, and they will fracture by pressurised water, chemicals, and sound and shock waves. They'll fracture the pores of the shale, which is basically layers of silt, mud silt. And then with the additional pressure, they will force that gas up to surface. They have to do that because there is actually no strata pressure to push the damn stuff up. So for the energy content they're getting out, they have to put a hell of a lot of energy in. So the energy footprint for the extraction is very, very high, which flies in the face of any commitment to energy efficiency in the overall envelope of an energy policy. It's an absolute, it just doesn't make any sense. There's nothing consistent about it at all. The thing about, I've mentioned the Bowland reserves, I'll end here. It's not just limited here to here. The Bowland Hodder series, the Carboniferous series, about 320 million years old, stretches from about Carlisle down to southern Cheshire on the west side, and maybe out towards Wrexham, as far west. And then from Teesside down to Immingham on the Humber coast, and a belt straight across. It's not continuous. Much of the Pennine area itself will not contain a recoverable reserves, but either side of it, flanks outside of it, will do. Particularly the Lancashire coastal plain, which we've already seen has been subject to seismic impacts since over the last year or so. In conclusion, and Martin's covered far greater detail than I can offer you. What I would say in conclusion is that really shale gas extraction is the last refuge of scoundrels, both environmentally, economically, politically and socially. There is nothing in it for our class, nothing at all. I'm sorry, I'm speaking as a doctor of economics, but I am in your class, believe me. I sell my labour power, not very well paid for it either. But whether I was or not, I'd say the same thing. But the thing is that it's quite clear that there's more than a whiff of desperation about this whole thing. We are an economy driven by neoliberal ideology in which people and the environment in which they live, the social environment in which they bring up their children, look after their elderly, comes last, doesn't even come second. It's a philosophy driven by profit at the expense of the natural environment, at the expense of resources which are not ours to squander. It is basically it's a programme which we should be rejecting and trying to link up the communities affected by it. Because at the end of the day, it's all our environment. We are responsible for its management. We are responsible for the condition it's in which we're at the point we hand it up to subsequent generations. And if we want energy security, it can be achieved within a sustainable economic and social framework. Martin will be mentioning climate jobs which can come out of it. We could transform the quality of people's lives by making energy as a social resource. We could actually make sure that people do not worry when it comes to the temperature going down in October, how they're going to keep warm, how little they're going to eat. I know people who are single parents who they buy microwavable food because they can't afford to put the oven on. That is in the 5th richest country in the world, and that is a scandal. And shale gas will simply add another dimension to that scandal. Don't let it happen. Thank you.
I'm not going to assume that everyone in the room is opposed to fracking. I know, for instance, there are large sections of the trade union movement that consider fracking a worthwhile prospect in terms of economic stimulation, jobs, and so on. And I think it's very important that we do debate these things through. I hope by the end of my contribution you will come away thinking that fracking is a bad idea. I have to say, though, I'm disappointed that Caudrilla aren't here. I'm disappointed for a number of reasons, partly because I think they have a duty to explain to local communities what they are doing. I think it reflects actually what they've done elsewhere, not just Caudrilla, IGAS as well. There are people who live near Barton Moss or Balcombe who've tried very, very hard to have a meeting with representatives of the companies that are fracking their areas, and they've been unsuccessful. So I'm not surprised they're not here. I am disappointed. I think that contrasts absolutely with how we do things in our movement, in the trade union movement, in the environmental movement. We just debate the ideas through, and we try and find a way forward. We share ideas, we learn from each other, and that's another reason that Caudrilla aren't here. I'm also disappointed, but I'm not surprised. One of my favourite authors is an American, or was an American socialist called Upton Sinclair, and he famously wrote, "It's very difficult to get a man to understand something if his salary depends on him not understanding it." I'm going to start there with America, actually. I start with America not because it's somewhere I've been a lot or I've studied a lot. I start with America because it's the place where fracking has taken place on a scale that is absolutely unprecedented and without parallel. And I also start with America because I think that some of the way that companies like Caudrilla would like to proceed is reflected in what has happened in America. Brian before me spoke and mentioned a number of the countries, parts, the states of America that have extensive fracking. If you look at the sites that have been fracked on the scale that those companies do in the United States, you'll find that those landscapes do not return to their pristine environment. Those landscapes are destroyed for a very, very long time. They're polluted, they are damaged, they have the remains of fracking oil wells everywhere. And that, of course, is without talking about what can happen to the people who live near them. Last month, 1,000 American healthcare professionals wrote to President Obama and asked him to stop fracking, at least to include fracking in the environmental legislation that's not covered by that. Their letter is quite stark reading. We should remind ourselves that these are 1,000 doctors, 1,000 scientists, 1,000 people who work in hospitals and so on. They're not swivel-eyed lunatic trade unionists or green-haired environmentalists. These are healthcare professionals. They outlined in their letter to Obama the dangers fracking poses to health and environment, drinking water contamination, carcinogenic air pollution, acute and chronic health effects, as well as greenhouse gases. They note recent research that people living within half a mile of fracking wells had, and I quote directly here, a higher excess lifetime risk of developing cancer than those who live further away. There are a growing number of documented cases, they point out, of individuals suffering, and I quote again, acute and chronic health effects while living near fracking operations, including nausea, rashes, dizziness, headaches and nosebleeds. And they say that given this toll of damage, the prudent and precautionary response would be to stop fracking. It's not just humans that suffer, animals suffer, wildlife suffers. Herds of cows have been destroyed by the American Environmental Agency as a result of the poisoning they've received. There's great concern amongst those healthcare professionals and people who are concerned about fracking in the United States, in particular about the wastewater that comes out of the fracking process. Now, I'll come on to what Caudrilla would tell you about this, but firstly I want to point out that there have been hundreds and hundreds of cases in the United States where wastewater has escaped, leached into the wider environmental systems and water systems. In New Mexico alone, for instance, there have been 421 documented cases of contamination of water sources from wastewater in fracking. Just one example, the most recent one I could find in October 2013, a news report about a study into wastewater from a water treatment facility in Indiana County in Pennsylvania. Researchers found, I quote again, high levels of radioactivity, salts, metals in water and sediment located downstream from the treatment facility which processes fracking wastewater. A Duke University team analysed water and sediment samples, finding radium levels 200 times greater than samples taken upstream of the plant, higher than what is allowed under the American Clean Water Act. Now that's treatment plants, that's where you take water to be cleaned up after it's been extracted back from the wells. And Caudrilla will tell you, in fact, Lord Brown, the chairman of Caudrilla, friend to the Tory party, former member of BP, and if Caudrilla were here I would ask them why he was no longer working for BP. But Lord Brown claims that this is a result of the treatment problems at the treatment plants and that their wells won't leak, and it's only a result of imperfect castings that have led to such leaks. Now, the problem with that is that in Pennsylvania, the closer you live to the wells, the more likely your water is contaminated, and the more likely you are to find, say, methane in the water supply. And again, I quote there, not from a trade union report, an environmental report, but from a study done by the National Academy of American Scientists in July 2013. Now, my background is physics. I know that in physics you always try to find the ideal way of doing something. You imagine the round thing moving in an airless room in a frictionless environment. I don't believe, though, that you can extend that to the real world. I do not believe that you can't build hundreds of wells that don't leak. I think this is fantasy. We all know that industry has accidents, people make mistakes, people cut corners, companies try to make more profits by getting rid of health and safety people and the rest of it. So I don't accept that you can possibly have fracking on the scale that Caudrilla would like to do in the northwest of England without having some leaks and problems. Certainly, I would like to hear a very robust defence of what they're going to do with the water that they do take out of the fracking wells in the future. Now, I want to take on some of the other arguments used by those who support fracking, because I think for an audience of trade unionists, I think these are particularly important. One is the question of jobs. You see, George Osborne told the House of Commons Select Committee that fracking would create lots of jobs. Lord Brown, the chairman who I mentioned earlier, said in 2012 that shale gas industry would lead to up to 50,000 jobs being created across the UK. Now, I don't believe that's true, not least because Caudrilla's own internal reports say that that's not true. Their report titled Economic Impact of Shale Gas Exploration and Production in Lancashire and the UK claims a maximum of 6,500 jobs could be created across the UK in ideal circumstances, peaking with 2,500 in Lancashire at maximum. A more likely solution, they say, is 1,700 jobs given their prospects for drilling and so on. Now, that can sound very, very attractive. I come from Salford. Salford is not exactly a place where there's large numbers of jobs for people, high levels of unemployment, high levels of poverty and so on. But we should be honest that these jobs, as jobs do in the oil industry, are very often highly specialised jobs based on a transitory workforce that don't often live locally or stay locally for very long. And particularly the nature of fracking means that jobs move around, people move from different areas to different areas. Also, Caudrilla themselves do not claim that these jobs will be permanent jobs. They say that the maximum length of those jobs lasting would be from 2016 to 2026, i.e. 10 years of jobs. Now, even if they were true, even if we were to create 2,500 jobs from fracking in the northwest of England. I'd question what sort of jobs they would be. I doubt very much they'd be well paid in all circumstances. I think a lot of them would be knock-on jobs in the service sector, service industry, and so on. But we would also have to ask about what the other impacts of fracking would be. What would be the impact on, for instance, tourism in the northwest of England if hundreds and hundreds of different fracking wells are built around the area? What would be the impact on economic, if we're talking economics, on the price of land or the price of houses when you're talking about dozens and dozens of lorries driving past that? And I just take a moment to make another point about the lorries. The British government commissioned a report made by an environment consulting firm called AMEC, which was published at the end of last year. Their study says that for each fracking well you'll get 51 lorries every day for 3 years during peak production, and 14 to 36 lorries during the exploratory process of the digging of the oil well. I'm afraid that will have a big impact on your local homes prices, and certainly the likelihood of children being knocked over on the street if they go to school, etc., etc., etc. I just want to also note that the government themselves don't believe those figures. You hear the politicians coming on about large numbers of jobs, but a report in January suggested much smaller levels of job creation, a maximum of 5,300 of peak. Now they want to do this on a big scale, and we should be absolutely clear that the Tories have nailed their energy policies to fracking. They're absolutely committed to it. They have given, or want to give the go-ahead for fracking to take place in half of Britain, 37,000 square miles. And we really are at a crossroads, I would argue. And one of the reasons I think that the police have behaved very brutally to the protesters at Barton Moss is because they know that this is the front line. If they're stopped at Barton Moss, it will be much easier to prevent fracking taking place in other parts of the northwest of England or across the country. But the Tories are absolutely committed to this. They do not believe in renewable energy solutions. They do not believe in alternatives to fossil fuel economies, and they are certainly, some of them, very, very excited about the prospects of the amount of money you can make from fracking. Michael Fallon, the Energy Minister, described shale gas as exciting prospects. Now, one of the reasons for that is that government report from AMAC back in the end of last year made out that each drill site is worth £4.8 million. That's a lot of money going to a very small number of people, a very small number of corporations. Now, I worry about that. I worry because actually I think that gives the Tories, who are obviously very clearly excited by large sums of money, it gives them carte blanche to do all sorts of things. That's why they offered bribes to our local government councils. Rather than saying to Salford Council or others like it, here's some money to protect jobs, to protect services and so on. We're cutting your jobs, we're cutting your services, forcing people to be unemployed. But if you accept fracking on your area, we'll give you some money back. I think it's a vicious, nasty, cynical bribe from a government that's clearly only interested in making itself lots of money. I want to talk now a little bit about the climate change aspect of this, because another argument you get from the fracking companies, from politicians and so on, is that fracking, the gas from fracking, can be a transitory fuel to a lower carbon economy. The idea being that the way we produce energy these days from coal and so on produces too much carbon, that fracking, the burning of gas from fracking will produce less carbon, and that's a step in the right direction that they suggest. And I firstly think it's absolutely clear. If we burn the fossil fuels we already know about, we are starting to go down the route of climate change on an absolutely unprecedented level. With the floods that we saw in the southwest of England and the south of England in Wales in the earlier part of this year will be nothing compared to what we will see if climate change starts to get out of control. And the idea of burning even more fuels, finding even more sources for them, is an absolute nightmare from the point of view of those who want to see less floods, less environmental destruction, and certainly care about the environment our children have got. But we should be absolutely clear, as Brian suggested, the people at the top of these energy corporations don't have that priority. That's why they spend $600 billion a year trying to find new sources of new sources of fossil fuels, even though every single scientist who has anything to do with climate change or environmental questions know we have to stop burning this stuff, we have to leave it in the ground and find some alternatives. I'm going to now come on to some of those alternatives, because I do think it's very easy to be a socialist, an environmentalist, a trade unionist, and say these are the things I'm against and this is what bad's about it, but you do have to have some concrete alternatives. And I think, you know, it'd be wrong for us not to stand here. Caudrilla have their alternative. We have to offer it. And I'm going to use a very simple example. And I think it's an example that I find it be hard pressed to find someone in the country who doesn't agree with. But I think it also exposes the rottenness of our the system we have and the priorities of it. It's about housing insulation. You see, the last time the figures were available, which is 2012 to 2013 in the winter, the government themselves say that something like 31,000 pensioners died because they couldn't afford to heat their homes. Sorry, 31,000 people, 80% of those were over 70. Many of the others were under 5. That's a 29% increase on the year before that, and a 5% increase on the 2 years before that. Those people died because gas prices are high. They died because their homes haven't been insulated since they were built. They died because the energy companies are more interested in making profits. They died because the Tories cut or want to cut subsidies for energy prices. But they also died, if we're absolutely cynical, because this government doesn't care about the unemployed, it doesn't care about the poor, and it doesn't care about the elderly. In Germany, every year they retrofit insulation in 250,000 homes. In Britain, they've done 219. Now, if you were to insulate those homes, if you were to have a massive scale insulation scheme up and down this country, with the sort of subsidies that oil companies get, with the sort of subsidies that Caudrilla want to get, or iGas want to get, if you did that insulation scheme, you could give jobs to 1 million under 25s. You could give them jobs going around insulating homes for pensioners. You'd stop them freezing to death. You'd reduce their energy bills, and you'd reduce carbon emissions. It's a win-win-win solution. Everyone benefits. Old people benefit, unemployed people benefit, the economy benefits from having that amount of money pumped into it, and if we're honest, we'll start to save the environment because you reduce emissions. We can all think of other examples. You could think about pouring money into giving people jobs working on public transport. You know, you could think about all sorts of different examples, and that's why the trade union movement is absolutely clear. We don't think people should lose out in a transition to a lower carbon economy. We don't think people should lose their jobs. We think they should be retrained and redeployed. Those people who work for Caudrilla and those fossil fuel corporations, let's train them up to build renewable energy schemes. Those people who are unemployed, let's give them jobs insulating people's homes. Those people who have got no skills and want skills, let's give them jobs teaching people about a low carbon lifestyle, or arriving buses, or building buses and trains and low carbon transport system. The reason they don't do it, of course, the Tories, is because they make money out of that. They don't see that, but they're also shackled to those fossil fuel corporations. They're linked to them. They're tied to them. That's their priorities, and that's what's driving them forward. So really, in summary, I don't think there's a case for fracking. I think there's only a case for fracking if you're a CEO of a corporation who wants to make profits. There's a case for fracking if you're a politician who wants a hand in the trough, or a nose in the sort of snout in the trough is the phrase, isn't it? You know, there's a case for fracking if you're one of those two groups of people. It's a very small group of people. There's another case for fracking as well, which is that really if you're on the bigger oil industries, or you're a coal baron or an oil oligarch, because actually what fracking does is it ties you to a fossil fuel economy. There's no case for fracking if you want to live in a community that doesn't have any pollution. There's no case for fracking if you're worried about where your grandchildren are going to live because of global warming. There's no case of fracking if you want a job that's decent, that's protected, that's looked after. The sort of jobs I'm talking about could be local government jobs with decent salaries, linked to trade union rights, with collective bargaining schemes. I doubt very much that Caudrilla allows that, but if they were here, I'd ask them. But anyway, I'm going to finish up there. I'm sure people have got their questions, and I don't want to assume that anyone hasn't got questions or doesn't think that there's some reason for it. I think the situation in Ukraine today tells us actually one reason why we need to be absolutely clear about energy security. But I will say one other thing though on that question. The trade union movement is committed to the idea of climate jobs. That's the major trade unions in this country have signed up to an argument that we can create 1 million jobs, giving people jobs in those renewable energy sectors, in those insulation schemes, in those public transport schemes. That's how you build energy security. But you don't just build energy security, you give jobs to unemployed people, people on low wage, you give people hope for the future, not worrying about what's going to happen on the other side of the world. That's how we really build the alternative. Caudrilla shouldn't have a place in that future. Caudrilla should give up and go home, and we should have a real thing. But it will require the trade union movement, the environmental movement, standing up and demanding more from this government, fighting for more, or whichever government we get next, because actually they're not going to give it to us. They've said where their priorities are. It's time for us to say where our priorities are.
Thanks very much, Martin. As I said, this part of the meeting is where you get the chance to raise any of your comments in relation to comments which have been made by the two speakers, or raise any questions which you have in general about the issue that we're meeting here tonight to discuss. So, first comment from the floor.
It's a comment that rather than a question. My name's Bob, and I'm part of an organisation called Residents Action on Fire and Fracking.
Oops.
We've been fighting fracking for 2.5 years. We were the first people to be fracked. Coming on to the energy security issue, I just wanted to add something to that which Martin and Brian have said. In December, our organisation was invited to give evidence at the House of Lords Economic Affairs Select Committee. And in the session that followed us, there were some energy consultants, one of whom is for the offshore industry. And he stated, and I don't have all the figures that he's got yet, but I have a meeting set up with him to get them. In the North Sea, we still have 45 trillion cubic feet of gas unused. And that's the gas that's in place that they are currently extracting. There is also a lot more in the Orkneys and the Shetlands. So we keep talking about energy poverty and people dying because they can't afford the gas, and the government keep telling us that we've only got 2 days gas left because we've got a cold snap. It's absolutely untrue. This consultant said that the previous government, the Blair's government, created an artificial gas shortage by imposing punitive windfall taxes on the offshore gas industry, which caused them to turn down the flow. They turned down the flow because it would have been uneconomical for them to continue production if they'd reached the threshold at which they would have to pay those windfall taxes. If the government were to not be giving taxes to the shale gas industry, but removing the punitive windfall taxes from the offshore industry, the gas would flow, the price would drop, and there would be no problems with gas shortages. I'm not advocating for 1 minute that we should burn it all, because I don't think we should. But what I'm saying is there is no need for fracked gas. There is no need for coal bed methane. There is no need for coal seam gasification. And there is no need for shale gas in this country. We have sufficient gas in place in the Orkneys, the Shetlands, the Irish Sea and the North Sea to keep us going long enough to transition over to renewable fuels, which I agree with Martin is what we should be doing. Thank you.
Thank you. Apologies that I don't know anybody's name, so when I just point at you, I'm not being ignorant.
I think Brian's right when he says that the working class are going to suffer. There's no benefits for us as a class at all. A minister a few months ago spoke about how the fracking and extreme energy extraction should be in the desolate north. They're not going to have fracking in Eton, are they? Not at all. Cameron spoke about how 74,000 jobs would be created through fracking. Well, that's completely fictitious. It's going to be a very highly trained but very small workforce, and because of the cost it takes, cost of training them up, it's going to be a transient workforce that go from compound to compound. The haulage firms and the construction industry, which will be needed for sites, it's only going to be short-term jobs, because once they're finished, them jobs have gone. And that is why we should be investing in 1 million green jobs, sustainable jobs, and jobs that are going to be there. Bockham, and more so in, excuse me a minute, show the strength of and the importance of local resistance, because that's what we need. We need local resistance. And I think it's important that we as discussed briefly, the role of the police, both in Welcome and especially in Barton Moss. They've been particularly brutal, very, very brutal, and there's quite a few of us who've been up at Barton Moss. They've attacked old people, young pregnant women, and they attacked only a few weeks ago the Children's Day. Why have they done that? The reason they've done that is because they're there protecting the profits of iGas and, and Caudrilla as well. And on the filed, even the Caudrilla report accepted and admitted that the earth tremors were directly caused by the fracking, but the government said that was fine because the tremors wouldn't cause structural damage to the houses. I mean, this leads on to the fact that the horizontal drilling, which has made fracking economically viable these days, will frack underneath people's houses, and the government are trying to push through Parliament a law that says that you don't have to ask or receive permission of homeowners to frack underneath their houses, but already several insurance companies have verified that the houses in the fracking area would not be eligible for insurance. I mean, in short, the amount of the recoverable shale energy is unknown. We know how much is there, but we don't know how much can be recovered. And Cameron's already admitted that the gas prices will not be recognisably lowered for us, so we won't benefit. But what will happen is the earth will be irreparably damaged. And I haven't even begun to touch on the water pollution and the health issues that both Martin and Brian have spoken about. The economy is not going to benefit, but the social consequences are really concerning. I can't see any benefits in extreme energy extraction, and I'm really disappointed that Caudrilla very cowardly didn't turn up, because they have a duty to explain their actions and the consequences of their actions.
Whoops, sorry. Brian Jackson, Friends of the Earth. I'm a water pollution campaigner, and I've worked on fracking amongst other things. Two things that really bothered me recently were the fact that the dirty fracking water has been dumped into the ship canal. There's nowhere for it to go, except it stands up because it's in locks. Therefore, anything you put in there, you build up. And I've got loads of figures here that make your toes curl just thinking of them. For instance, 400 tankers per day each well. 400. Do you want 400 tankers going past your house? Particularly tankers full of poisonous chemicals. 600 different chemicals are used. Mixtures of all kinds of stuff. And this stuff has to be disposed of. They tried to dispose of it, but the Environment Agency in Europe turned around and said they can't do that because they've already exceeded the limits, because the stuff that's produced there has to be disposed of there and they can't do it. And we're talking about not billions but trillions of gallons of wastewater. Trillions of gallons. It's unbelievable, the figure. It's enough figure to drown this entire valley up to the top of the hills. They're really not bothered. And finally, well, I can say briefly, we caught Cameron out in an out-and-out lie. He promised, you may have heard these stories about the bribes. Cameron was going to bribe councils so they'd play ball with him, because he knew they were broke, so they had nowhere to go. But what he said was simply that we're going to give 1 million gallons, we're going to give, £1 million to each council that will play ball with us. When we checked the figures, and our accountants aren't stupid, and we had it checked by the local papers as well, it turned out that the million that was promised to each council was actually 1 million for three. £1 million was what Rossendale, Burnley and Pendle in total would get. That's Cameron's idea of economics. I could say lots more, but you'd say it was political, and it is. Because, I'm a political animal, I can't help it. Friends of the Earth are not just a nice middle-class organisation that wears sandals and, hoe the garden occasionally. They're ordinary people. They have to live, and they have to face the truth. And what we always say, and we agree with people from the Green Party, etc., on using only what we need to use. We should save stuff, particularly that which is a fossil fuel producer. And there's nothing in fracking that's clean, nothing at all. It's full of, well, the chemical word we use is SH1T. And that's what it's producing, lots and lots of it. And of course we'll all have to pay And like the biggest pollution worry to us is actually the fresh water usage. Barton Moss was a triple SI only 5 years ago. That's a site of special scientific orders of what's known as a floating bog. I used to play there as a kid, I know it well. And when I last went, I was appalled to see what they'd done. They took out all the topsoil. They started boreholes, and they had there was no permission, there was no foresight of what was going on. They just went ahead with it. And then as soon as anyone objected or bothered to turn up saying, that's not nice, you can't do that here. Oh yes we can. Why? Well, we're the police. In fact, we're Greater Manchester Police, so you know how we behave. And if any, I'm sure there's other people have seen this. People get beaten up regularly just to enforce stupid rules. And I can't think of one rule that this government has brought in that's been anything but stupid.
Well said.
Sometimes outright dangerous, with no concern for people, local people. Even the workers on site, they're breaking environmental laws, environmental rules. A triple SI was a site of special scientific interest indeed, but not for them. It was only a site that could make them money, and the more they got out of it, the better. And the government just went ahead and overruled everything. Look how Somerset dealt with the floods. Did they get help from Cameron? He actually wore a pair of boots at one day. And then they sent the soldiers in without Wellingtons. I don't know what they're supposed to do, swim for it. But anyway, that's the way this government works. They're animals, I'm sorry. That's the only word I can use for them. And if you read the stuff I put in Facebook, you wouldn't be able to use it in a sort of a respectable audience. They'd have me dragged out and whipped. Anyway, that's Friends of the Earth's view. We're totally opposed to fracking. We saw no reason for it. We don't like the organic carbons. We don't like the wastewater. We don't like the amount of water that's wasted, literally, not just wasted straight away, but they find new reasons to use it. And we're talking about 62 trillion gallons of water. What the hell are we supposed to do about that? When the water runs out, they'll probably put the water rates up, hand it over to you, Northwest Water, which is a French company working with Total, who've taken over some of the fracking orders, so they're behind it. This is what you're up against. It's a cartel, and it's a cartel against the environment. A few years ago, you would have said, well, terrorists, we've got to stop terrorism. Now, it's the environmentalists that are the terrorists. Just because we have the audacity to say, Cameron is a lying swine. And I say that in front of all of you. And if you don't agree with it, well, tough. Because I'm going to say it again and again. I'll see you on Facebook if you want me to with it.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Gentlemen.
Yeah, Pete Smith, Chair, Birmingham District Friends of the Earth. I'm not going to disagree with Brian. What I am going to say is that these not bribes for allowing fracking sound very similar to these not bribes for allowing nuclear waste to be dumped. Yeah? Taking up Martin's point about insulation, Pendle have put solar panels on the roofs of old people's bungalows. Calico, the housing association in Burnley, wouldn't do a thing like that. But it seems to me that even in this part of the world, there is scope for things like solar panels. There's certainly scope for more use of wind energy. There is certainly scope for small-scale water turbines. My colleague Avril Hessen was at a meeting where somewhere in Derbyshire they have produced pilot schemes. Reverse Archimedean screws, that sounds painful, doesn't it?
That's right, yes.
Yeah. It sounds like something out of an adult film, but in fact it's a method of generating electricity from a relatively small amount of water falling a relatively small distance. Martin's a physicist, he'll explain it. But the more water you've got falling, and the greater the height it falls, the more energy you can use. Now, we've got enough rain in this part of the world, we've got enough wind, we are living with the consequences of coal. We don't want fracking, we're not going to make any money out of it, we're just going to suffer the consequences. We're not having it.
I went to, sorry. I went
Mine's a question, not a statement.
No, mine isn't a statement either. I went to the open evening at Ellswick.
Excuse me, could you use the mic, please?
You just can't talk both. You need to stand
Sorry,
up.
I don't want to use the mic.
Come on,
I don't want to use the mic. I was just going to say, I was at the meeting with, I was at the meeting where Caudrilla met with the public, and that's probably why they're not here today, because I think.
Them off.
I think because so many people turned up to the meeting, there was absolutely nobody there who seemed to be in favour of it, and if anybody was even so much slightly sort of not sure about where they stood on it, they were more erring on the side of we'd rather you wouldn't do it than you did do it, sort of thing. But Caudrilla was saying, you know, we went in there and I was saying to them, if nothing else, we're worried about the water. Quadrilla say apparently they've got a method to clean the water now. We don't have to worry about it. And I said, you've got to be joking. There was a programme 2 nights ago on the BBC that was saying we haven't quite developed it. And Quadrilla and Arup were clearly saying we have got a method to clean the water already. And my friend who was with me, he said, we have a water shortage in this country. We're worried about, you know, you're going to use up all the water. He said, we will turn the water supply off to the fracking sites before it even gets to that. Your water has got to be our priority. And the trouble that we've got is fighting against things like this. So people who don't quite know about the fracking industry are going in and hearing these stories from Caudrilla, and it's very difficult to argue against it. And what I was going to ask is how do we move forward with this? Because every time we try and have a meeting in this area and do something about it, Caudrilla seemed to have a better push in the press. There was a meeting in Freckleton where the people were so concerned. I've never been to such a big meeting. There were about 200 people in a very small room asking the county councillors, the parish councillors to do something. And the very next day there was an article in the local paper saying that there were rabble-rousers and environmentalists who turned up to that. Well, being a rabble-rouser and an environmentalist, I know we kept our mouths shut, firmly shut, and it was the people from Freckleton who were very frightened and saying they don't want this happening on their doorstep. So I think most of the people in this room are probably anti-fracking and want to move on. What I want to ask you is how do we move forward? What do we do next to move this forward and really make a change?
My question to all three of you is, how are you going to vote at the next election and the upcoming elections in the face of this fracking threat? I've got the T-shirt, and I don't often wear this T-shirt. I joined the Green Party when I lived in London. I lived my adult life in London, but I'm from Lancashire. When I came back home to Lancashire about 7 years ago, the election came around and I couldn't vote Green. There was nobody to vote for. So since then, I've stood at every single election. In Hyndburn, I live in Hyndburn Borough, which had been Conservative controlled for a long time. 2 years ago, was it just less than 2 years ago at the election, Labour took control of Hyndburn Council, and I'm a socialist at heart, and so I was delighted by that. And then, similar kind of timescale, this fracking threat appears. I now got new friends over in West Lancashire through this. What was that saying that Tina says, meeting really wonderful people for the shittiest idea, shittiest reasons or something like that. So Labour took control of the council, great. Fracking comes along, I approach the Labour people that I know because I'm involved in local politics. I've always seen my role as the Green Party kicking ass from the back. There's not enough of us to make a real threat to sort of take power or anything. And I was surprised by the indifference of the Labour group in Hyndburn.
Shame.
It's changing.
And so then the British Geological Survey released that report that went public and appeared in the national press and the local press. The Labour leader of Highburn Council put a statement in the local media coverage saying he was delighted by fracking, that it was a great opportunity for the economically challenged East Lancashire to get jobs and prosperity. So I couldn't sleep last night. That night I went to bed, I tossed and turned, I got up at 2:30 in the morning, wrote this email using a strategy that I used to use in London. We were always told to, if you were writing a political letter, to do it as an open letter to the press. So it was the first time I'd used that tool up here in East Lancashire. I wrote this open letter. Immediately got a reply from Miles, who's the leader of the Labour group, and got interest from the local press. So, you know, I explored what Labour's policy is on fracking, and it's woolly, and it seems to be actually for fracking. So from that, there was my letter appeared in the press, Miles made a statement, and it appeared as a feature in the Accrington Observer. I can't track Lancashire Telegraph because it comes out every day. I don't know what it said in Lancashire Telegraph. And so the solution of Miles, the Labour leader of Highburn Council, was to invite Caudrilla to come to Highburn to a public meeting. So I scratched my head and I sent another open letter saying, well, why Miles? Caudrilla don't have any interest to come and frack in Highburn. If anybody was going to come, it would probably be iGas, because we sit on the coal bed, you know, the whole of Highburn's on top of coal seam, and that was my greatest worry, because fracking's awful, but the things they're doing with coal seams is much scarier than fracking, in my opinion. And I'm enraged by the whole thing. It's hard to keep a thread of it. Oh yeah, and then when Fallon made that comment, you know, about we're going to frack the desolate north, pretty soon after that, Labour conference came about, and I sat through video of Ed Miliband's speech. The only mention he made towards fracking, which is a national threat, you know, it's not just about Lancashire. We're the test case here because they think we're stupid. What would somebody call us? Neanderthals? You know, some lord somebody called us Neanderthals.
Aboriginals.
Aboriginals, that's it. You know, I'm proud to be an Aboriginal. I'm a Northern European. I'm proud of it. I'm a proud Aboriginal, but I didn't think he meant it as a compliment. You know, Ed Miliband mentioned in his conference main speech fracking, and he only mentioned that, and the whole of conference erupted in laughter. And I'm sorry, I don't think it's funny. I don't think the threat to Lancashire and the rest of the UK and Europe and the world is funny. So I want to know, you know, who you going to vote for at the elections? And if you think you're going to vote Green, are you? Because it needs people like me. I'm not a politician. I'm a passionate swivel-eyed loony, probably. Somebody could quite easily tell me that it was. But I want to vote Green because when Martin mentioned about rolling out all those green jobs, Kirklees Council did that. They're a green council. They found money in Europe and they did that. You know, if you look at Kirklees Council's website, you see how much money they've saved, how much carbon they've saved, you know, with more green representation across the UK. And even if you're really committed to the Labour Party, kick some ass in the Labour Party and get them to come out because they're missing an opportunity. I'm pretty sure there are going to be people, and then you get that comedian standing up telling people not to vote, you know. So think about it hard, soul search. If you've never had an opportunity to vote Green, please do seriously look at Green policies and think about joining and standing and giving people in your community a chance. And if you're really committed to Labour, please, you know, make a commitment to weekly write to somebody who makes decisions in your Labour group and say, you've got to come out against fracking because it's wrong. It's wrong for workers. You look at how the workers in the fracking fields are treated in North America, they're treated terribly. You know, we've had Ian Crane, who's quite controversial, come in and talking to us, but he was working in the oil industry, and it was him seeing young men die. You know, that's what he gave him his wake-up call. He was one of those people. He liked having thousands of pounds split in his bank account every month, thank you very much. But something in his heart, when he went to, was it the third young man's funeral, he went, what's going on here? And it was the young men who'd been sent to do the bit where all the stuff squirts out, you know, and they're just poisoned by the industry. The industry don't care about the workers. So if you can't join the Green Party, make sure that your Labour representatives know that it's, you know, workers' rights are really at stake from this industry. Sorry.
There were two ladies in the second row who wished to speak. The first one, I think, was a lady.
Can I speak?
Top, yeah.
Thanks. I came tonight with an open mind, really. I'm from the Fylde area, and I've listened to the RAF people, and I've listened to Caudrilla. Caudrilla do a very good presentation. They win you over just like that. They tell you the water they use is far less than the water they use elsewhere, etc., etc. They do a good presentation. I don't trust them as far as I could throw them. But they do a good presentation, and they're convincing people. They're convincing people on the telly, in the newspapers, going and doing presentations. We're not convincing people. I'm not convinced tonight. I'm sorry, I'd love to be convinced. I want to have arguments that will convince the politicians, the fat cats, the British Geological Society. We want to remember that there's lethargy in our community, sadly, because we're all going through a recession. We're dealing with people who are optimistic, who think, oh, well, Caudrilla will probably be fine. Let's be positive. We're dealing with people like that, and we haven't got good arguments. We need to get really tight, good arguments. I'm not convinced tonight, I'm sorry. Convince me. I'm a staunch member of the Labour Party over in Fylde. Now that is like being, I don't know, a loser all the way through. Our local CLP is talking about fracking. And we're trying to convince the leaders of the Labour Party to talk about fracking. Already Ed Miliband is now talking about fracking. There is a change there. We're working from the grassroots up, and we'll continue to do that. There's a lot of people working from the bottom. Please, all you scientists and people who are on Barton Moss battling against the cold face, as it were, give us the argument so that I can go out there to my local community, and when they say, you know, fracking's okay, really, give me the facts. Please give me the facts. I don't want scaremongering. I've read a few of the leaflets here tonight, and there's silly comments about extreme comments, I think, about how we're in dire danger. I don't think we are in dire danger. I'd like to think that we could find arguments that would prove that, but I'm not convinced we're in dire danger. Our future generations might be.
Go down to Barton Moss yourself.
Pardon?
Go down to Barton Moss.
I am doing. I'm going down to Barton Moss next week. I've been trying to go down for about 3 weeks.
Go down this week. Go down tomorrow.
Yeah, can't do so. I've got off work.
You can't go next week because be a
But I will go down.
They might be there next week.
Go down this week.
I'll try and go Wednesday. I'll try and go Wednesday. But I'm watching you all the time, and I'm full of admiration for you. I'm full of admiration, but we need to get arguments. We need to convince the police to say no to their bosses. Why are you laughing? Get your arguments. Get your arguments.
We've been pushed down the lane, we've been knocked aside, we've been knocked over to be stood on to get arrested because we're in the way.
We need to get the arguments. We need to get the arguments. Can I just say one more thing? The biggest argument, and we're not using it, is we have to stop burning fossil fuels.
Yes.
And we're not using it. We're talking about pollution and earthquakes and all sorts of things, and we're not convincing people with that. But we will convince people. We say stop burning fossil fuels, and this is just another fossil fuel.
That's the argument.
Thanks very much.
Well said.
There's obviously quite a few people who wish to speak, and as I said at the beginning, we're heading for 9 o'clock, and that's roughly the time that we want to leave because of our speakers need to get transport home. So I can see about 5-6 hands up. What I'd suggest is that to give Martin and Brian the opportunity to wind things up at the end and just reply to the idea that there aren't strong arguments, for example. 5 minutes for the remaining speakers from the floor, and I mean, if that's impossible, obviously it's an impossible demand to place on you. So what I'd ask you to do is, please, if you want to make a point and you've not spoken already, please stand up and make it in a few sentences, and we'll try and get everybody in by 5 to 9, and then allow Brian and Martin to comment. So, first person who hasn't spoken already, and I think we'll take this gentleman here because we've had very few from this side.
So 3 quickies. One, the danger of methane is underestimated in my view, particularly for East Lancashire, which is the old coal valley of East Lancashire Valley. And we know that methane is 20 times more harmful in global warming terms than ordinary CO2. So when people argue from the fracking industry that somehow it's environmentally friendly, it's quite the opposite. It's very dangerous, and methane is lethal stuff. And the second thing, because of the old workings of coal mines and the heavily populated valley, we mustn't underestimate the effect of earthquakes. I mean, only recently there were 16 earthquakes in North Texas around Fort Worth. It's now risen to 30, and the local population there in Texas is so concerned that it actually is causing structural damage, 3.6 on the Richter scale. So we shouldn't underestimate that. The last point is that while the government wants to sort of undermine people's rights who own homes and have to get permission to drill underneath, I would still advise people, if they want, to register on the Greenpeace site, www.wrongmove.org, and register your objection to any drilling under your property.
Thanks very much. I should turn the gentleman with the pullover just behind the gentleman in the jacket.
Yeah, I'll keep it brief, and it's not a request for people to vote in the election for any party, because I don't think, in a way, we can wait that long, and certainly at Barton Moss, we weren't able to wait that long. Quickly on the issue of police brutality at the Barton Moss, you know, Simon Pook, who works for Lazar's Solicitors, who has an experience of this going back years, has said that it's the biggest example that he has of political policing since the miners' strike, and that's what the people at Barton Moss have had to put up with on a daily basis. And so I think we should just bear that in mind. I do think, though, we should go away from this meeting not all just thinking, if we all go away thinking this is terrible and we should do something, I think we should go away with an idea of what kind of group is going to come out of this, what kind of campaign is going to be built out of this, whether we be in the Green Party, whether we be in Friends of the Earth. I know there are members of the Socialist Workers' Party here, Labour Party and so on. And finally, there is a march and demonstration in Manchester on Sunday at 12 o'clock at Piccadilly Gardens. Now, I think that's a chance that everybody who can make it, if you can drive, that would be great. There's public transport, the X43 that goes past here. 12 o'clock, Sunday, Piccadilly Gardens. Thank you.
Yeah. I've been working underground from 14 to go in my pension. I know a bit about working below. This fracking is going on over 1,000 metres below ground. Most coal mines are not quite as deep as that. When I started, there were over 1,000 coal faces in Britain and 1 million miners employed. A coal face could be as long as that room or a bit longer. That's immaterial because you're only taking 4 foot, 5 foot, 6 foot, wherever the seam is. But the tunnels, the ingress and the out, were as big as any modern house living room. Large tunnels, 16 by 12. That's to get supplies in, air, water and all that. 1,000 coal faces, I'm going back to 1949, never ever caused an earthquake. So I say to these people not protesting, the worst thing you can do is peddle false information. I spent days and days and weeks at Green Common. I know the dangers of protesting and peddling wrong information. All you do, you give ammunition to the Daily Mail, the Sun, never mind Rebecca Brooks, the people before her, what were communists, in wolf's clothing. But I'll tell you this, if you peddle wrong information, you'll give ammunition to the opposition. Never ever do that. Be sure of your facts, do your study, do your reading, and peddle the truth. If you peddle the truth, nobody can follow you. Thank you.
Thank you. A couple of points. It's interesting that Caudrilla haven't come here tonight, but there's a meeting at Rosica Parish Council tomorrow night. Rosica is the little village that they're going to invade next. My colleague Bob's going to be there. There's an engineer called Mike Hill, a coal and gas mining engineer, is going to be there. Caudrilla are going to send 2 people. The Environment Agency are sending somebody. The Health and Safety Executive are sending somebody. And the Office of Unconventional Gas and Oil are sending somebody to Rosica. Now, this is a game changer, I think. I think they're hunting in packs now, and they are indistinguishable. You know that bit in Orwell's Animal Farm where you look from the farmers to the pigs to the farmer, and you can't tell the difference? Let's not be under any illusion. The industry, the Environment Agency, the HSE, and the Office of Unconventional Gas and Oil are all one pack. And we really need to up our game. And if we're getting our messages wrong, will you write to us via the RAF website, please, and let's have a discussion, because we've got to get it absolutely right. The other thing is on policing. I've gone to our local police force in Lancashire and said, we will be having a camp at Rosica. I've looked at what they've done in Sussex, and I've looked at what they've done in Manchester. I expect better of Lancashire Police. We, protectors, will, conduct ourselves in a proper, responsible and lawful manner, and I expect the same from Lancashire Police. I'm putting on the onus on them to behave themselves properly.
Last speaker from the floor, unfortunately. Thank you.
Thank you. For those of you that I didn't get on the way in, or those of you who came here to be convinced one way or the other and have decided that you are now anti-fracking, or even for those that actually still are undecided but would like to have some more information to work with, can you please see me at the end if you want to help form an East Lancs anti-fracking group. We'll be contacting people to help get this off the ground. I'm aware that there are people here that can help us to do that, because nobody's mentioned it tonight, but the government are hoping to issue a licence to frack on the M65 corridor this spring. So this is something that we need to be thinking about moving on very quickly. So if you want to, please see me at the end, and I'd like to get some more people signed up. Thank you.
Brian is the person who has most urgency. We need to get away, so I'll ask Brian to make any comments in response to your comments.
Very briefly, really, if you haven't had sufficient arguments tonight to convince you, then I really don't know what else we can do. I would actually say that if there is a reasonable margin of doubt, don't do it. That's always a good principle. There is a considerable burden of doubt that fracking is environmentally harmful. It is also going to be something which is not in any way socially beneficial in terms of energy supplies and energy costs. There's a statement by INEOS, who would have been one of the biggest participants in fracking had they not been convinced otherwise, where they said that they can see no production costs or benefits in the UK for at least 10 years, after which the whole of the energy world markets will be in a different shape. That's from a huge company which would have been a partner. They're not convinced. Also, Mark Linder from Caudrilla himself said that they looked into an extensive assessment after they were reprimanded by the Advertising Standards Agency for exaggerating the cost benefits of fracking, and they had to admit that it had gone into extensive examination of the facts, and they concluded that basically there were no significant benefits in terms of costs from fracking over conventional gas extraction means. So that's on those 2 points alone. Plus the fact that other people have mentioned don't burn fossil fuels. We should be phasing out fossil fuels. We are going to enter into a new fossil fuel era. That's absolute insanity. We know if you have a situation where in 10 years, that's half the lifetime of my youngest daughter, there have been 3 once-in-a-century events. Something is happening. There are terrible warnings. Don't do it. That's the prudence principle should apply in that respect. As far as voting is concerned, okay, yes. I mean, unfortunately, there was a strong movement to stop the use of gas being used in primary energy for power generation, because it should be conserved, should be used for domestic use only, preferably in combined heat and power, where you would, with your rent, you pay a certain amount for your energy bill. They do it in other countries, but however, it was actually a bloke called Gordon Adam, who was a Labour MEP, who actually put through a bill actually deregulating use of gas. That was in 1981. Since then, there's been a gas bonanza in power generation that's wasted the resource and increased CO2 output as a consequence. And because that's been available, all other considerations of energy efficiency and all the other benefits that could accrue from it, like jobs, like a secure, sustainable environment, they've gone by the board. We're going to repeat that tragedy again. As far as the police are concerned, I really, as a veteran from Orgreave, I have no illusions in the police. I don't care, really, what the individual police officer says, because at the end of the day, I'm sorry to sound extreme, but it's like the guards on the cattle trucks outside Auschwitz. I'm only obeying orders. That's ultimately, it's the last refuge of a scoundrel. You cannot rely on an assumption that the police are somehow neutral. They are under the direction of the paymasters, and the paymasters are people with the money to influence the government. Regarding the bribes, if you consent, you're a small community like the one's going to be visited, going to be have a charm offensive, going to be charm bombed, aren't they? Small backwoods. A bunch of yokels who are a pushover. They'll go in there with the silk suits and the smarmy smiles with the packs and everything. And what they'll do is they'll say, I bet you this, they'll say, you let us do a test borehole, we'll give your community £100,000. That's the going rate, £100,000 per borehole. But that's on the assumption that you will not object in the event of a planning process going ahead. That's bribery. That's absolutely venal. That's disgraceful. And for any politician to associate themselves with that kind of behaviour is absolutely beyond any standards of decent political life. As far as fighting is concerned, you can't fight it side by side. You've got to have a united campaign. You must link up each of the communities facing this. You must have a movement that can actually shake the government like the way that fracking is going to start shaking if we don't stop it.
I mean, that's the absolute disgrace, because they know if they came out and seriously talked about climate change, environmental impacts, what's happened elsewhere in the world and fracking has been used, they wouldn't stand a chance. But actually, the problem we have is people are desperate. People's communities are desperate. They're desperate for money, they're desperate for jobs, they're desperate for services, because they've been stuffed by the friends of the people who are doing the fracking. Let's look at Caudrilla. Let's look at the man at the top of Caudrilla, Lord Brown, former CEO at BP, 12 years at BP. As soon as he was put into his new government position, he did a few things. He appointed some people to bodies of government. He appointed 4 people to the Treasury, 4 non-executive people to the Environment Agency, and 3 more people to the DEC, the body that deals with climate change. Now, this is a man who's heading up the company that's at the forefront of trying to implement fracking, and that's his links with government. Now, why can they do that? Because that really is corruption, if we're honest. That really is cynical manipulation of politics. It shouldn't be allowed in any rational democratic society. Why can they do that? Because actually, the agenda of this government is to drive through fracking, because they're friends of the fossil fuel industries, they're friends of those corporations, and they want that. And you see, the problem we have is, I think there's a brilliant case against fracking, but you have to start from the wide political picture. You can't simply start from it hole by hole, as somebody said. The facts are out there. There's too many scientists out there, too many health professionals, too many educated people who are lighting up the problems of it. Now, our job is to say it's clearly there's a problem with it, and we have some doubt. And of course, we should then also say about the dire danger. I mean, the woman who spoke is absolutely right. If we do this, we are condemning our children and our grandchildren to a life of misery. It's probably a life of environmental destruction, but actually it will affect us too. You see, who would have thought that the first city to be wiped out by environmental disaster would be one of the cities in the most powerful, richest nation in the world, New Orleans? Hurricane Katrina destroyed that, and it destroyed not just New Orleans, it destroyed the poorest of the poor. It hit the poor people, and it won't just be poor people in Bangladesh. It'll be poor people in Somerset who can't afford the sandbags. It'll be poor people on the Somerset Downs who can't afford to live there anymore. Our class is going to start suffering, and our class has to respond, and that will be true. There will be more storms, and it will get quick. I mean, who'd have thought 10 years ago that they would really, some people would be talking about letting go of the Somerset Downs. We can't sustain it anymore. Who knows where we'll be in 10 years' time, but I can tell you if we start burning that coal from fracking, we're more likely to be in a situation where people can't afford homes, where they can't afford the insurance, where there's floods regularly, where there's storm damage regularly, and the rest of it. And of course, is not to worry about large parts of the world that will face hurricanes, that will face systematic droughts, famines, refugees from wars over water, and the rest of it. And then you face against it David Cameron. How absolutely nasty that man said there's unlimited public funds. There's only unlimited public funds when Eton got flooded. Notice that, isn't it? It's only ever when the people in the hardcore Tory area start to get it. When it's the desolate north, no one cares. When it's the desolate, when it's working class communities, no one cares. Nobody is going to frack in the back of George Osborne's estate, are they? No one's going to frack in the back of the of Chequers in the countryside. And I think what we have here with fracking is an opportunity. Really, it's an opportunity to bring together two groups of people: those people who are concerned about the environment, and those people who want to see jobs and services. But actually, they're not really two separate people, are they? Because most people are concerned about their environment. I mean, back in the 1930s, it was trade unionists and socialists who went and climbed up the hills on the Pennines to get the right to roam. Working people have always cared about the environment. They've always wanted a better environment. They've always wanted no pollution. They've always wanted their kids to be able to go to school or wherever and have decent lives. And the rest of it. We have to start building. We have to start organising. I mean, the woman who said it at the front is absolutely right. It's not really what we're arguing about. It's where do we go next? I think the person who said it there is absolutely right. This Sunday is a demonstration in Manchester. Luckily for me, it's a bit closer than for you. But I think anyone who should come, because I think it will be about bringing together the Barton Moss people with the wider networks. And of course, we'll have debates and discussions and disagreements along the way. I'm not sure I agree with everything people do at Barton Moss. I actually think they should do more protesting, not just at the camp, but more protest at the politicians and the rest of it. Which brings to me, how will I vote? I'm a socialist. I'll vote for a radical left candidate if there possibly is one. Other than that, I'll vote for Labour because I want to get rid of the Tories where I live. But I tell you what, the biggest thing I'll do is I will make sure I vote at the next election, because the key question is kicking out Nick Griffin, if we're absolutely honest. But that's a little opportunity there for me to get in a dig at the far right and the fascists. But I'm not going to let how I vote divert this movement. I want to stand arms in arms with this woman from the Green Party and this woman from the Labour Party, because that's how we'll change things. It's not going to be, if we divide ourselves at this stage, we'll never stop Caudrilla, never mind what they're going to do to the planet. See, we're on the front line. It's not just northwest of England. So, what we're doing here matters. If we stop them at Barton Moss, we'll make it much harder for them to drill the hundreds or the 1,300. I heard one figure saying that they're talking about drilling. If we stop them at Barton Moss, we'll be more likely to stop them in the future. It's not just us. It's the people in the idle more movement in Canada against the tar sands. It's the people in Bulgaria against the fracking. It's the people in New Orleans still trying to get their homes back that have been flooded. This is an international movement, and it's an international movement from the bottom. Because the politicians don't care. They only care about the money. Let's remind ourselves of one of the figures. £4.8 million is the worth of a single fracking well in the northwest of England, and they want to build thousands of the things. That's what they care about. Our side has to say we've got a different priority and a different agenda. And let's remember what David Cameron said. There's unlimited public funds. There's unlimited public funds when it comes to a political crisis for the Tories. We have to make a political crisis for them where they say, OK, we know we can't do Caudrilla or iGas or the rest of them, we can't do fracking. So actually, your movement is so strong, we're not going to do those cuts to that local hospital, that local school, that local community. We're actually going to create some jobs, but it will require us starting to use a bit of our power, actually. People have talked about some of the struggles and so on in the past that we've won. I'm sure Burnley Trades Council is absolutely heart of the strikes and the protests that there have been. We need to start having some more of that. More blockades, more protests, more strikes, because that's the only thing that will stop the Tories, and it's the only thing that will save the environment. Indeed, it's the only thing that ever has. Voting probably has changed very little in terms of the environment. What will stop and save the environment is taking to the streets, protesting and joining a trade union, getting active. I'll finish it there. I think we've strayed a little bit from the question of fracking, but it's inevitable really, because fracking is not a single issue environmental question. Fracking is a question that goes to the heart of the political priorities of this government and the political priorities of the system that we live in. We have to stop fracking because it's the thin end of a wedge, and it's a very, very dirty, polluting, awful wedge. Thank you very much.
Martin's got to dash off, so and also you've noticed Brian has dashed off already. Yeah. So thanks to both Martin and to Brian for some excellent contributions. The question which we wanted to end on, based on a couple of your comments from the floor, was what to do next. And I'm aware that there already are groups within East Lancashire which have been established in opposition to fracking. And clearly there's been an invitation from one of our speakers at the front to discuss when this meeting ends, right now effectively, the idea of setting up some kind of organisation as a result of the meeting. And also Bob Dennett of Residents Action on Foul Fracking has suggested that he would like to bring that together and discuss their experiences in establishing a group in this particular area. So what I'd like to do is to formally close the meeting, but give Bob the opportunity to speak from the microphone. But firstly, I'd like to ask Pete how long this room is available for.
I've actually got a end time on it, but I'll think we'll probably be done by 9:30.
Did you want to say a few words, Bob?
Yeah,
yeah.
I'll be as brief as I can. In answer to the comment the lady here made about grave danger, Professor Tony Ingraffia, one of the world's leading experts on fracture mechanics, who used to work for Halliburton and was one of the people that actually developed this process and has now come out strongly against fracking, states that between 6.2 and 7.2% of all shale gas wells drilled fail upon installation. A further 50% of those wells will fail within the next 10 to 15 years. And they will all fail within their lifetime. By failure of the well, we're talking about a failure of the cement that seals that well. That's approximately 3/4 of an inch layer of cement that goes down the side of the steel casing. Well, we all know that cement doesn't last forever. You've only got to look at the pointing on your house. Caudrilla have drilled 4 wells in the Fylde. 2 of those they've damaged. That's a 50% failure rate. If you're not frightened of that, if you don't think that's grave danger, then I'm sorry, I don't know what will be. These people can be stopped. Caudrilla's original business plan was to have 20 operational wells in the Fylde Peninsula by the end of 2013. Myself and my colleagues in Residents Action on Foul Fracking, Frack Free Fylde, Reef, Kerry from Friends of the Earth and support from our local people, we stopped them from achieving that. They have no operational wells. In the process of trying to con the public, what was it, the phrase that Brian used, the scoundrels are trying to con the public in our area into allowing them to drill on 2 more pads. And in order to achieve that, the government are using taxpayers' money and sending out people from the Department of Energy and Climate Change, the Environmental Agency, the HSE and the Office of Unconventional Gas. In actual fact, as Ian said just now, they're sending them out mob-handed now to try and convince the public that they should accept this. As I said earlier, we don't need this gas, because if they remove those punitive windfall taxes on the offshore industry will turn the flow back up, and then we can do away with fracked gas. Brian mentioned a company called INEOS several times. Well, INEOS were on the television a few days ago talking about the chemicals. That's the real mother lode. They're after the chemicals, and they're trying to sell it to the public on the basis of a shortage of gas, which they created. However, the real reason I wanted to talk to you is to say that we can stop this. If you start a movement locally, not just one movement for the whole of the area, small groups in different locations. Kerry, Tilbury, Hindburn, somebody in Burnley, somebody in another small town on the outskirts, because the more small groups they are, the greater chance we have of success, because A, the government, B, the oil companies, and C, the police don't know how to deal with the different dynamics of those small groups. We've all spent time down the Balkan, we've all spent time in Barton Moss, and we will be setting up camps in the Fylde when they come there. I am more than happy to travel the country and help anybody set up a group. We've spent 2.5 years researching, so we can save you a lot of time in getting your groups together. Not just us, I mean there are a lot of us around the country, and you're not on your own. There are tens of thousands of people in the UK that are opposed to fracking. We've linked up with the Occupy movement, we've linked up with the Anonymous movement, we've got Friends of the Earth, we've got Greenpeace. Friends of the Earth lawyers are working on legal challenges, Greenpeace are working on legal challenges. We can and will stop this. I personally will continue to fight until this stops. I won't stop until they stop. I've got 8 grandchildren, another one on the way, and I am not going to let them harm those children, because it's my generation that allowed this to occur, because we didn't realise what was going on. We've had all this nice lifestyle, and whilst we were enjoying our nice lifestyle, these people were removing our freedoms a teaspoonful at a time. And now is the time for me to put something back. And I will go anywhere, and I will help anybody to set up a group to fight this. The very first thing you need to do, and I've just heard that they're planning to sell a licence in this area fairly soon. It won't necessarily be Caudrilla, because they're like seagulls zooming in on a piece of bread. The very first thing you must do is you must watch your planning register on a daily basis. As soon as that licence has been sold, as soon as there's a petroleum and exploration development licence for this area, you must watch your planning register on a daily basis. I'm talking about your county planning register. And don't just look at the register for, oh, there's a planning application going in, so we'll fight that. If you look at that planning application, you will see that there are several tabs on it. One of those is headed attachments. You need to go in there. This is a lot of work. You need to go in there and you need to look at the detail in those attachments, because as they say, the devil is in the detail. You will find out from those attachments exactly what it is they're planning to do, or what they say they're planning to do, because they're all lying. But you'll find all the things in there that you can use to object to that planning application. And then you need to mobilise. And because you'll only have from the minute they put a planning application in, you've got 2 weeks. Because the Tories are rewriting the law, and instead of a statutory minimum of 21 days, they're shortening it to 2 weeks. So this is the most crucial part of stopping them. You've got to keep your eye on the planning register, and the minute the planning application goes in, you've got to have the planning letter pre-prepared, just put the planning application number on it, and bombard your local authority with objections. Good luck.